All right, you guys, we're here with another episode 13 of the Sefcik Show. I'm very excited to have our special guest here today, Ivan Raiklin. I'm going to introduce him more in a second, but I just want to give a quick shout out to our producer, Doug, behind the cameras of Lever Dreams. Thank you for making this possible. We are on episode 13. I just want to thank everybody who has been tuning in and supporting what we're doing here. Before we start talking to our guest today, which you guys are going to love, okay, there's a reason this man's been traveling the country and serving. I'm going to get into that in a second, but stay tuned. You are in for a treat today, you guys. But we are going to pray in as we always do. So just, Lord God, just thank you for this episode. Just thank you for Ivan being here today to expose truth, to tell the truth of what people truly need to hear, Lord God. And we just thank you for the freedom fighters that we do have in America, trying to do what's best for our country, giving up our lives, giving up our time, our effort, everything that we have to truly expose the truth. And we just ask that you keep, everybody, all of our family and friends safe with everything that's going on in the world, Lord God. Just please just keep using us to help better people's lives. And we just ask that your will be done at the end of the day. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, Ivan Raiklin. This man, we got connected in Virginia at a federal courthouse because freedom fighters are finding each other. There's very few of us actually out. Right. Where a lot of people talking about it, but there's very few that have been about it. Ivan, you have not only served our country for, I believe, over 20 years, and you'll tell us a little bit more about that in a second, but you're also an attorney and a person who has not just been talking about things, but in the streets, finding out the truth about what's really been going on, especially the last few years when we're seeing the world just explode, really. Things are falling apart fast. Absolutely. Yeah. So before we get into really deep details, Ivan, I'd like you to share with us your experience, so kind of like what you've been doing in your past. How are you? You served our military. Tell us a little bit about that. You're an attorney, a little bit about that. Tell us about just who you are.
No, absolutely, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
Lucky number 13 episode, right? So yeah, like you said, we bumped into each other back in a couple months ago. I think it was for a hearing for the Chaplin case. That's right. In order to push back against the EUA product mandate by the illegitimate acting Secretary of Defense, right? And then all the downstream from that order, where people were trying to force folks into this product, right?
Right.
So we can go and talk about that.
So many directions, right?
Because bottom line, just like you, I'm sure, I did not bend the knee, and I was actually in the system while they were trying to force that on me.
And by the system,
Department
you mean in the military?
Defense. Yeah. So I just retired August 30th of 2022. So just a few months ago. Wow. And basically, my background is professionally. Last quarter of a century, I spent serving either on active duty in the National Guard, in the reserves, across multiple disciplines, whether it be as a Green Beret commander, at the detachment and company level, whether it be as an intelligence officer doing counterintelligence, human intelligence analysis. And then the last thing that I did, essentially the last few years within our national security ecosystem, was I was essentially dual-hatted in the reserves. I was a technology scout out in Silicon Valley, assessing companies that wanted to do business with the Army and national security ecosystem that were building products essentially in the AI and mixed reality and gaming space, right? For training purposes, and then improve the AI component in order to be able to compete and beat China, right? That was the goal. And then on my full-time side of things, I was an instructor at what's called the Joint Military Intelligence Training Center. And so I taught not only U.S. intel community officers, junior, mid officials, but also our international partners. So that program essentially covered, throughout the course of the history of that program, I probably trained, folks from whether it be the Bureau, FBI, different agencies, State Department, DIA, Army intelligence, Coast Guard, like basically from pretty much the entire intel community, and then several dozen countries that are partnered, like whether it be NATO, African countries, our Asian partners, Korea, Japan, things like that. So that's kind of my background, where I taught national security, I taught intelligence analysis, critical thinking, and then matched that with, aside from all that military and intelligence community and special operations background that I bring to the table, and my experience, my bias experience, as well as passions. When I wasn't on active duty, I picked up a law degree and then became a constitutional lawyer. Wow. So, I mean, that's kind of my background and how I apply my knowledge, skills, and abilities to address problems. For those that aren't aware, like a Green Beret, you think, kick down doors, this and that. That's really not the primary role of a Green Beret. The primary role of a Green Beret is to conduct what's known as unconventional warfare.
Got it.
What that means is you go into another country, you train, advise, and equip a local indigenous force that you link up with to then help them overthrow their government that is not friendly to the United States.
Wow.
So we're both on the same kind of team. We're just giving them a capability.
Got it.
Now take out the kinetic component, and then what do you have? I mean, it's essentially in a free society that's called politics, right? Mm-hmm. And so with that background, constitutional law background and all that, I came back, I did a bunch of deployments. Well, not a bunch compared to some other folks, but I did a few deployments countering ISIS, Taliban, MS-13, Russian aggression across I served over 4 or 5 continents, I guess,
right,
in 5 languages.
Wow.
And
yeah, you were speaking some different languages here when you got here today with different people here.
Yeah. To
and
your
I'm like, man, this
producer,
man is the real deal.
Obrigado. In the back there. But bottom line, I mean, that's my background. That's what I bring to this fight. And I have a strong foundational understanding and knowledge of our U.S. Constitution.
Huge.
And that's really that's our rule book as an American citizen, right?
100%.
And the thing is, we've strayed so far away from that. And hopefully we're going to get into what our problems are and how do we address them.
No, we're definitely going to get into that. And I'm going to speak up for you right now and say you are one of maybe the top 5, top 10 people in the United States that are being investigated and interrogated. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know this thing because I've gone through that a little bit in my past, and especially the last year. You are on a whole nother level. I've been hearing about you through the grapevine. I know your connections and how deep they go all the way to the top. Just like you were explaining, you have been everywhere, brother, in terms of the government and serving and stuff like that. So you have those connections. Even the people that dislike you, you have those connections and you know what's really going on. So with you knowing the truth about so many things, there's a reason why they have suppressed you. There's a reason why they have messed with you. You know what I'm saying? And I know you've gone through a lot with dealing with all these people coming at you because you know the truth, and the last thing they want to know is exactly what we're talking about.
Because it forces a reaction.
There's 100%.
So where there's an action, there's usually the whole adage, equal reaction.
Yes.
Not with me, bro. Not with me.
And you just
it's going to go to 11 immediately when you come after me.
And like you said before, you just haven't bent the knee. You just haven't bent the knee, and I've seen you at these things, man. And isn't it crazy how so many patriots, which are out there, thank you, but there's a lot of people talking about it, like we said in the beginning, but they're not showing up to these things. I remember with the whole Defeat the Mandates march I did, and the Freedom Convoy and Freedom Stage, and all we did. There's so many people.
That's when people stepped up.
Correct.
Those were the real warriors.
Correct. And you started seeing who was really about it, and as we teamed up with Bashaw and
I think I bumped into you at January, the DC mandates?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Over at the Lincoln Memorial.
And that
was amazing,
dude.
That
was incredible, incredible. That was the first time we were
brought
finally
the whole family
and
out.
People 17,000 people showed up in the cold in January. That's when I was like, finally, people are starting to see and waking up. And as we're seeing unfold, it's just at an exponential level now. What people
they bought time, and now it took them 2 years to finally catch up to what we understood as reality.
Correct.
3 years actually for some of us.
Yes.
So back in 2020. December of 2019 was the COVID release.
Yes.
I call it the CCP-19 Wuhan flu, the Kung flu, right?
Yeah.
What happened? What was the first thing that happened that China did? China said to big tech, "Hey, you can't call it that because otherwise we're going to not give you access to China."
That's right.
And so what did the big tech companies do? We follow the money, right? Is what they said. Follow the science. We only follow the political science, and we follow the money, right?
Wow.
You know how science is spelled? The S is a dollar sign, the C is a cent sign, the E in science is the euro sign.
Yep.
You get it, right?
No, absolutely. I haven't even heard that before, but I feel like you need to make a logo for that or something.
No, I would put it up all the time. Follow political science, but it would be spelled in currency letters, right?
Yeah, makes total sense.
It's totally
and that's the truth. You know what I'm saying? And we're going to dive into it, brother. From your experience, because let's be honest, not many people can sit where you're sitting right now in your shoes of someone who has served so long at high levels of our military and knows our Constitution as a legit lawyer and attorney. Can you tell us what we're seeing right now in our country? Because as somebody who's, as a family here and a small business and as a patriot and as a fighter here, what I feel truly is our country is being destroyed at a very fast rate.
Full stop.
Can you tell us?
Yeah, you experienced it as a business owner.
Correct.
I think business owners woke up and said, what's going on here? So I can sit down, have a mask on, or actually sit down and eat, right? And then the virus ain't going to get me. There was some intuition without going in. You don't have to be a doctor or anything. Nothing made sense.
Nothing made sense.
And then the whole information psychosis that was pushed down on us. Bottom line is, with my background, I'm trying to position myself to be America's law offensive coordinator. I think we talked about this beforehand. Awesome. Or I guess my
title.
I have a Substack called Deep State Marauder, right?
Man, you got a lot of good
and the reason why I do that is because at the end of the day, our executive branch right now is totally lawless. Not only is it completely illegitimate because of what just occurred to us in 2020 with I call it the illegally certified election, and the United States government agrees with me. That's why they had to change the Electoral Count Act.
Wow.
Because of my argument that was retweeted by some consequential figures, and then I was booted off of Twitter for that analysis. But bottom line, we're in this essentially twilight zone that was created by China. We talk about like what's going on. A lot of people on mainstream media will say, especially on the right, the faux newses, the news vax, I call them, right? And you know who I'm talking about.
I know exactly.
Faux news is how it's pronounced, and then news vax is how it should be pronounced. I'll explain why. So they talk about the problem being on the left. Well, it's not. That's not it. Yeah, a good portion of the problem is on the left. It actually spans the entire ecosystem. And unfortunately, on January 6th of 2021, the Chinese Communist Party just installed its main agent in the United States into the White House to defile our country as well as defile the White House. I'm talking about China's ambassador to the United States, pronounced Zhiden, right? Joseph Robinette Zhiden. And I don't say that because it's funny or it's hyperbolic. Let's look at the evidence to support that conclusion, right? I taught intelligence analysis. Let's support that conclusion with evidence.
Yes.
So number one, the Hunter Biden laptop, we all heard about it, right? Well, guess what? It's actually out there and legit. There's an organization called Marco Polo USA that created a 500, what was it? It's several hundred-page report, 600-something page report that lists the 459, I believe, crimes committed by the Biden criminal syndicate. And then what's the biggest crimes? Not only the sex crimes and this and that, like drugs. I'm talking big crimes like espionage, working with Chinese Communist Party intelligence services. I mean, those are big things where 10% for the big guy in a joint account that's held with Hunter Biden, and he's receiving and doing deals with the Chinese Communist Party's senior ranking members tied to the intel services of China for years. That's straight up treason.
100%.
And then it was limited in distribution right before the election. Why? Because you had 60 intelligence officers, former intelligence officers within our U.S. government that published an art or a memorandum signed off by those 60, 51 named, 9 unnamed. You probably heard it as 51, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what they report on. There's actually 60. 9 of them were not named. I'd like to know exactly who the 9 that aren't named are. And what did they do? They published in the publication what I call Folitico, right, down in D.C. Anyway, Folitico reported it, and they said that it was had all earmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign.
Of course.
Well, guess what? It had all the earmarks of a complete faux news campaign in order to protect your big guy so that you can install him into office and then advocate and do China's bidding in the United States that would benefit China and systematically and deliberately slow walk the United States into complete collapse. Every single policy since the Chinese agent has been in the White House has resulted in what? Benefit China and destroy our country from within.
I was about to say that.
So that's the big picture, what's going on. And I would love to sit and debate any single person that would want to counter any of that. That's just like top level evidence.
Literally
every single policy, right? Every single policy. And then even before that, that was even occurring on the right. So we're talking about the left, right? Well, who was the CCP-19 task force lead, which the media changed the name from the Wuhan task force, or I should say the Wuhan flu, right? And then they changed it because it was censored. It was Mikey Pence, right? Mikey P. So what did they promise Mikey P in return for him essentially destroying our economy, trying to destroy your business? And guess what relationship the governor of Maryland has with Mikey Pence, or did, the previous governor? What was his name? Your favorite guy?
Which one?
That tried to destroy you in your businesses?
You talking about Hogan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old Larry Hogan.
Good old Larry Hogan, man, was totally against us.
He's pretty tight with
Put on the
Mikey
damn mask.
Pence.
Close my business, yeah.
And that was at the behest of Mike Pence collaborating with Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx through the governors. Hogan. In New Hampshire, it was Sununu. In Georgia, it was Brian Kemp. In Arizona, it was Doug Ducey. Those names ring a bell?
Absolutely.
They're all Republican.
All Republican.
And what did they agree to? They acquiesced to make money off of you and everyone else to force you to buy face toilets. And then when they sold enough of those, and then people already had one, then they said, no, you got to wear 2 face toilets because 2 is better than 1. And then they forced what? The testing, because who made money off of it? Who decided who doled out the contracts to the governors from the task force, and who made money off of those contracts to deliver the not only the face toilets and the PCR test, but before that, the ventilators and the remdesivir.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Follow the money. Who was the ultimate arbiter on who gets what at the state level? Mikey Pence.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong. You see why they censor me?
Of course.
Because I go after the top.
Of course.
Right? And so that's what was going on. And then you had and then they transitioned over, and once they made enough money off of forcing those products, again, all emergency use authorized products that had zero efficacy, actually negative efficacy, because the face toilets created problems not only for the kids, for their face, rashes on their skin, their body, staph on their face, and then the lungs were absolutely decimated and destroyed. What is that called in a normal society? That's called child abuse,
100%.
Asphyxiation, child neglect, and those are all felonies. So we need to go back and make sure that everybody from Mike Pence all the way down to every county school board that voted to force an emergency use product on a child, they need to face a felony for each child that impacted.
100%.
Every single one. And that's what I'm involved in trying to get to that point.
And I know we talked.
That's part of that Nuremberg 2.0 whole ecosystem. It's not just Pence. It's all the way down to whatever county we're in right now. If your county school board, I don't care if they're no longer a school board member, we're going to come after you based on your previous voting record that created this havoc.
And I like how you mentioned the top down, because it really was the top down. Because when I was fighting for Maryland, when I was running for governor, and you know how tough that was, especially as being someone unaffiliated with either side, I moved my children to another county so that they can go to a public school, because they didn't. It was the last county in Carroll County. They weren't making you wear face masks yet. It was awesome, and we got there, but 2 weeks into school, they folded because the state said, nope, we're not going to give you money funding unless you make these children wear masks.
Guess what?
And they folded. And I ripped. That's when I went to homeschool. Best decision ever made. But I saw it for myself, how crazy that was. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So CDC, what? Fauci tells CDC. CDC says, hey, you're not going to get any of this money to promote, oh, by the way, the mutilation of your child. You're not going to get any money for all these CCP-19 measures, right? So all this, not only the brain mutilation with, it basically, what do I call it? The promoting, I'm trying to remember the term that I use for, it's the acronym CRT, but the actual, what it actually stands for is conniving racist training. Okay? Conniving racist training. So essentially, they're funding these schools, and if you don't listen and comply to what we just talked about,
to the government,
then you're not going to get the money in order to be able to manipulate the child's brain and mutilate the brain and then mutilate the body.
Correct.
It's essentially a sequence of events of, hey, by the way, if the child survives murder in the womb, abortion, then we need to murder them at birth.
Yep.
As like in New York, and as Virginia almost got to that point with the previous governor. And then if they survive both of those attempted murders, then the school is now going to advocate that they mutilate themselves. And in California, we're seeing that, right?
It's unreal.
Without parents' consent, they're going to mutilate the child. Guess what?
Destroying the
I argue that those people advocating for the mutilation of children need to start with themselves, and we need to motivate them to do so. And they need to start with their neck, to mutilate and decapitate their head, so that, and then they can advocate mutilation for others.
Absolutely.
Right? Would you agree with that?
100%.
So
why are they pushing so hard on these children in every way? We're seeing it in our schools,
So
bro.
I want these school board members to vote for promoting the mutilation of our children. They need to mutilate themselves, and I think they should start with the vital organs. Maybe they should rip out their heart, rip out their brain. I mean, just rip out their neck, right?
Yeah.
And again, by all means, because then we won't have to deal with you.
It's that sick, and it's true evil we are seeing. That's one thing that I can definitely say that we've seen the last 3 years. It's opened up eyes for people that were always in that middle ground of what really good and evil is, what God and devil exists. People are seeing for themselves. There's no doubt about it.
I say this is not coming from like the top in the U.S. This is coming from, put your hat on. If you're a business in the United States or anywhere in the world and you're approached with, hey, do you want to have access to my 1.4 billion customers? What's going to be your initial reaction? Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of customers, right, for your product. Well, guess what? I'm talking to you, Mark Zuckerberg. I'm talking to you, Jack Dorsey. I'm talking to you, CEOs of every big tech, big media, and big sports league in America. If you want to sell your merch and your product over to China, you have to do the following things. You have to do the following things for you to get rich.
Absolutely.
Access to my market. And that is what? You have to destroy your nation from within. Promoting the mutilation stuff, promoting division, and
banning people that are talking against
create friction and clickbait so that society devolves into total chaos. You're going to make money. I'm going to make money. And you just helped me destroy your own country. Now China rises.
And it's happening.
That is
see it.
literally all of it. Every single, when you think about it from that perspective, it's like, oh, it starts to make sense.
100%.
And when your number one ambassador in the U.S. is sitting in the White House, it's like they did the deal. I mean, they did it. And he's Big Pharma's number one brand ambassador, along with his acting Secretary of Defense, who is advocating these the clot shots, the death jabs, the myocarditis producers, right, to the force. So if you're China, and the first institution in the United States that mandates the clot shots is the Department of Defense, what does that do to your national security?
Bro, let's go
they
right.
Just outmaneuvered
I want to go right off of that. I have always been a huge fan of military, man. One of the 5Ks, the runs we put on it's called the Freedom 5K because we benefit, we give money to the military and people that have served our country and been wounded. I've had family in the military. I have people that I train in the military. I have always loved and will always support our military, but I can't help but to say I feel the last 2 to 3 years alone, especially the last year alone, I feel like our military is becoming extremely weak with everything that I'm seeing, from things like the classes they have to take for transgender and
mutilation,
LGBTQ, and
promotion.
also
I call it mutilation promotion. There is no readiness improvement when you say, hey, you know what? You want to be a better soldier? Why don't you start with lopping off your fingers? What about your biceps? Go ahead and mutilate those. Go ahead and start working your way down to the genitalia, right? And just start mutilating. Just start lopping off whatever you want. And for those people that don't agree with that and think that's a complete mental disorder and disease, which it is. And it is.
It is.
For those that think it's not a mental disorder, or I should say, so those that think it's a mental disorder, well, you're going to get punished. That's not how it works. The boomerang's going to be massive, Kyle. Guaranteed. So my background, your background is a couple generations ago. Eastern Bloc, Soviet Union.
Yeah.
For my heritage. Right. My parents fled the Soviet Union from communism to come here. And guess what we're doing now? We have to do a total body check.
Wow.
It's not going to happen under my watch, right?
Our watch.
Not at all. So under our watch, and actually, you know what? For you guys listening, It's not going to happen under our watch because we're trying to build leaders here. I've been blessed. You've been blessed by having a successful businessman.
Sure.
I've been blessed with a stellar career. It's now time to motivate the leaders out there to say, we're not alone.
We're not alone.
And even if I'm alone, bro,
we're still going. We're still going. At least us.
I don't care.
We're charging.
I'm going to mutilate you on the way that you're trying to essentially crush me. So in the process, I don't care how big you are. I don't care if you're a Mike Pence, a Joseph Biden. It doesn't matter because the truth's going to come out and we're going to be on the right side of history. It took us 2-3 years, but I think it's going to be faster now that we have Twitter files and all this other stuff.
100%.
I went on a tangent, but
you're just
speaking from the heart.
About absolutely. Thank you. Aside from what they're now teaching and making the military do, I'm also seeing the best patriots, people like yourself, Mark Bashaw, all these other people that have truly been serving our country and have risked their lives and have been in deep and know what's going on. They're now like either being kicked out of the military for not wearing a mask or taking a jab with a weird substance in their body, but also they want to leave. They can't serve this military anymore. It's very scary to think about as somebody who lives in this country and supports the military. What is going on? Like what's up with the military?
All right, so your most critical thinkers, right? Unconventional thought leaders, if you will, come from the special ops community. Because as a Green Beret, as a SEAL, or any of these elite operators, right? You get to that point because you see a problem or an issue and you figure out the most efficient way to address it. It's kind of similar to an entrepreneur. You identify a problem in the market, and then you figure out the most efficient way to address that so that you can create that product market fit. In the military, Green Beret, you basically identify problems with a situation, see what you have in terms of assets, and then try to deploy what you have to be able to address that problem. So what I'm saying is here, critical thinkers are the ones that are actually leaving the military, just like you said. And so what does that leave us? Sheep lemming that listen to the prevailing incorrect false narrative that now essentially are begging for their own demise. If you go back to I believe it was 1930s in the Soviet Union, the big purge under Stalin. Basically, he purged anybody that was questioning, the tactics, even into, I think, World War II, of what he was doing, which was slaughtering a lot of people.
Yep.
Same thing here. If you question, again, critical thinking requires questioning the hypothesis, especially if there's evidence that counters the prevailing hypothesis. What happens to those people? Oh, no, you can't. You're deleted. We're going to call you whatever name we want. And guess what? It has nothing to do with reality, but we're going to call you that because the lemmings of society, the radical domestic terrorist left news organizations, are only going to amplify it and then convince through bots that are promulgated by big tech, not even humans. Most Americans, 90%, I'd say, of Americans, 95% of Americans, if not more, maybe more like 99, don't agree with this total lunacy.
I agree.
But guess what? The bots are creating the content to make it think like it's mainstream. And then the algorithms create, this thing got 7 million views. Meanwhile, it probably got realistically 5 views. But then through that social manipulation, think about this. 100%. If you see something, it got 7 million views, I got to watch it. So that's how you bring them into the matrix to normalize the mutilation training, right? And that applies also to those that are in our government and our military, because let's be honest. Okay, you're at work, but then what search engine are you using at work? It's the same commie platform. What video platform are you using? Hopefully it's Rumble, right? Hopefully it's Right Side Broadcasting, One America News, the Sefcik Show. But guess what? That's our job, is to create compelling content for people to be attracted to. That's why I love coming on like your show.
Thank you, man.
Because I get hit up by these commie platforms.
Yeah.
And guess what? I don't even respond to them. Wow. Most people are like, oh my gosh, that's the biggest news outlet in the world. I'm like, why would I support why would I comply and be complicit in the destruction of my country?
In the same game
by giving them 1 second of my time, knowledge, experience to create their content that brings readers to them.
Wow.
No. They're going to come to me, and then I'll embarrass them on my own turf.
I always think about what would be the best way to destroy a country, and it's happening. I always think, what would be the most smartest way without having a bunch
Not
of
a single shot.
Yeah,
Well,
without a single shot.
clot shot.
Well, there you go. But literally, when people think war, they think guns, right? And kill.
Right.
What is the best way? And you see it happening at a faster rate that you could ever imagine. It's happening. Not just from people dying because of the shot, but also just the negativity and the bashing of heads now in our country. That we're at war in our own country, created by other countries, right? So it's here. What do you think?
So again, I was trained to do this on behalf of the United States, unconventional warfare in another nation, right? To basically help build what that leadership in that country would consider an insurgency, to build them to then take over their government, right? Well, what did China, with the help of Russia and Iran and maybe slightly North Korea, probably not much, but whatever. Let's just throw them in the mix, and maybe Venezuela. But those three are going to be the key ones.
Right.
China, with support and knowledge from Russia, and then support from Iran to destroy our country, because they have an interest in doing it, right? Out of the 193 countries in the world, you have China has essentially placated us over the last year based on what we just experienced.
Correct.
And then Russia has the institutional knowledge to subvert other nations based on, when they were the Soviet Union. I'm not sure if you're familiar. I always have to bring this up. The Yuri Bezmenov model. You heard of that?
I'm not that.
If
that
not,
familiar,
let
no.
me. Okay.
Yeah, tell me.
So this is key, that's one piece of evidence that I want people to look at as they try to understand my hypothesis of this is what China's doing.
Share.
So the Soviet Union was considered, through the KGB, their intel services, one of the most capable on the planet with the U.S., right? And maybe like Brits, France. But what the KGB did was called ideological subversion, where you go and it's a 4-phase model, and there's a long video, but I think you can go on some of these platforms to look at the shortened version of it. Bottom line, it's 85% of the budget of the KGB was to come into the United States to capture the institutions, to then create that ideological, cultural subversion of what's right and what, flipping what's right and wrong, and then essentially getting people at each other. Now, this was at a time before social media. There was some main media plays out there, but now it's amplified even more. So we're talking about taking over the universities, right, and promoting, because 1960s was a big cultural revolution in the United States, right, and even in the Western Hemisphere, where the Soviet Union was behind it all. Well, take that knowledge, experience, and expertise and background, institutional knowledge, and imagine those individuals that participate in that are now advising Chinese intel services to then deploy their 1,000x person capability, or 100x, to the United States. So the Russians are advising China, and then they're implementing it here. That's my argument, and I'm pretty confident that that's what's occurring because of all the evidence. There isn't a single piece of evidence that's inconsistent with that hypothesis.
And you say, are they institutions? Like you go after these, you destroy
big tech. All you need is 20. All you need to do is recruit 20 key people in the United States, and you basically control society. What? CEOs of what? Big tech. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. That's 3. What about, that's big tech you pretty much own, right?
Yeah.
Because Instagram and all that follows subordinate to Facebook. Next, you go after big media. Faux news. Your ABC, CBS, NBCs, your Commie News Network, your MSDNC, and then even the more legacy publications, the Washington Compost and the New York Slimes, right? So that's maybe 7. So we're at 10, and you just control the entire information landscape with just 10 people, right?
Unreal.
10 people. Is there a mechanism to sniff that out? There isn't, because guess what happens over at the FBI, the organization that technically would be the one that supervises and does a counterintelligence risk analysis for the country. Guess what happens? They're the ones that are telling them to censor certain things. Is it possibly that Chris Wray and Mike Pence are also under the thumb of the Chinese Communist Party? Who would be the one to investigate that? Ivan Raiklin, because no one else is doing it.
And
that's why I created my Substack, because there's a gap in capability. Because guess what? If you have the House and the Senate that's providing oversight and funding over the Department of Justice, the Judiciary Committee, remember Nadler? Good thing he's off his committee as of yesterday. And then you have the Senate Judiciary Committee. Well, what if they're in on it? So that's only two other people, the chairman of both House and Senate. And then what if the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, who's the one that signs off on spying on American citizens legally, what if every single one of those judges is appointed by one person that has a visceral hatred for the current leader of the patriot movement in our country?
But
you see how it gets
But these people are leaders. Why would they ever do? The people don't do that. They have their job. They swore on the Constitution. They put their hand on the Bible. They would never do this.
Well, speaking of Constitution,
they would never. They would never do that. These people are amazing people that would never turn on us. Why? What are you talking about?
Hey,
yeah, there we go.
Look at what we have here. Let's talk about Mike Pence and the Constitution, right? You want to talk about that briefly?
Absolutely. And I doubt he knows the Constitution, which we're going to get to in a second, about how military and our head of people don't even know the Constitution if you were to ask them. Am I right?
Correct. So these civil servants. No. Whoa. Let me back up here. You're going to open up something here. So remember how if you turn on the manipulated media that's essentially leveraged and controlled or influenced by the Chinese Communist Party because they want that access to the market, right? They're the ones that have been promulgating. Remember when you say, I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic? Mm-hmm. What do they call that? They call it that what oath? They use some sort of letter of the alphabet to try to disparage the oath of office. You know what I'm talking about, right? The letter after P.
Tell me.
That theory that they're trying to make into a negativity.
I might look silly right now. I'm drawing a blank.
Okay, so that's fine. So anyway, the left, radical left, and probably some on the right are trying to somehow discredit the oath of office, which is enshrined in Title V of the U.S. Code, Section 3331. And it lists what your oath of office is to the Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic, that each civil servant and military personnel has to take an oath to, right, as well as state governors and leaders within the different states. Well, when they try to discredit it, what I consider that as essentially a domestic terrorist act, where you're essentially trying to discredit what the rule of law is. And so, unfortunately, our entire government, mid and senior officials, are going to probably be able to recite the oath of office, but they're not going to know downstream from that, like, what are they trying to defend? Because think about it. If you don't know the rule book, how are you going to enforce it and defend it?
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So if you're like, hey, I'm supposed to swear, I took an oath, I'm supposed to defend this thing. And then I'm like, all right, let me do a spot check for you, General Milley, Acting Secretary Austin, because you took an oath as well, right? And so I'm like, hey, man, let's make it easy. What are you going to do when, I don't know, you just violated the 25th Amendment or somebody else did? And they're going to be like, I'm not familiar with the 25th Amendment. Okay, that's too high of a number. How about the 12th Amendment? What are you going to do when that is violated? And they're going to say, oh, I don't really know what's in the 12th Amendment. I'm like, well, what are you defending, bro?
Unreal.
Sister?
Unreal.
Bro?
Unreal.
Oh, you don't like the amendments? Okay. What about, oh, you only know the Bill of Rights. Okay, let's go to the 10th Amendment. What are you going to do in that spot? Oh, that's too high of a number, double digit. It kind of equates to your IQ level. Well, let's go down to the base document. The base document, 7 articles, 27 amendments. Not much. I mean, look at this. Bible's a lot bigger than this, right?
Wow.
So then we go to the base document and we say, General Milley, or Joseph Robinette Jedin, or Kamala Harris, which are completely illegitimate federal executive branch officers, which we can go into detail on what that looks like.
It's obvious.
But bottom line is, what are you going to do when Article 1, Section 4 or Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 is violated? Because guess what? Every single thing that I just told you about, it was clearly violated and you did nothing. And if you don't believe me, let's go through the list. So Article 1, Section 4, time, place, and manner of elections. Did we have an election season, or did we have an election day? Last couple elections. Okay.
Wow.
What about Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, when those presidential electors were transmitted over to Mikey Pence through the Electoral Count Act on December 23rd of 2020? What happened there? He even admits that the state legislature, they didn't pass laws that made the elections run the way they ran. It was China Communist Party Wuhan flu that made these states, Dougie Ducey, remember?
Yeah.
Good old Mike Pence lackey. Gosh. He was the one that changed the rules of the game. And so did the Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, who's now supposedly the governor, illegitimate governor of Arizona.
Unreal.
But guess what the U.S. Constitution says? It says that the state legislature is the one that allocates those presidential electors on behalf of the state. So when a non-legislative actor changes the election law on their own whim and they claim, hey, I have the authority to violate the Constitution because of the Wuhan flu. And who made that call? I did. And what standard did you use? My standard. Well, that violates the federal Constitution, and Mike Pence agrees to it, but he acquiesced to it as well. That's what happened in the 2020 election. You don't have to believe that there was foreign influence, manipulation, digital manipulation, retail fraud, wholesale fraud. I could care less, because even if none of that occurred, everyone can agree that the election was done not according to the state's election law.
Wow. And we're just talking about how many things were violated in our election laws, let alone what happened after that with the whole pandemic, with the business closures and the
run-up to it. Everything.
We're just getting warm. It's
so
absolutely insane to people who truly see the truth. So I'm going to ask you.
So I started talking about it. And again, I'm a contractor at the time, and then I'm in the reserves at the time. And I have a First Amendment just like everybody else, as long as I'm not, there's some limitations to it. There's what's called the Hatch Act. There's as long as you're not negatively impacting your job as a contractor, there's no Hatch Act when you're a contractor, but there's still like norms, right? So I took it upon myself, off duty from those two positions that I was in, to go ahead and start to figure out ways to fix this. Like, how do we fix this problem and the unconstitutional activity of these federal actors, right? And so I took it upon myself, and I'm like, hey, I go to Harrisburg, I go to Madison, Wisconsin, to Phoenix, Arizona, to Lansing, Michigan, and then on Saturdays when I'm not on drill status, I would co-host a call, and we would organize, essentially saying, hey, this is how we can fix this. And I would go to and talk to state legislators, and I would express to them, this is how you can reclaim your electors. In Madison, you heard of Justice Gableman with the whole...
I heard of Justice Gableman, but...
So he was a former Supreme Court justice. Yeah. Bottom line with the election, I called it the 2020 election remediation effort, which can still occur on January, at the earliest, I recommend January 20th. Wow. So a couple weeks. Bottom line is, because the election was illegally certified at the precinct, county, state, and then at the federal level on January 6th, because there was no quorum on January 6th, by the way. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I did not know that.
So when I said 12th Amendment, General Milley, when you violated that, and you go in here and see, when it talks about a joint session for the electoral count, you look in here and it says, to be a quorum in the joint session, you have to have 2/3 of the states represented from the House, so 34 out of 50, meaning you have to have a minimum of one person from 34 different states on the House floor to constitute a quorum, and and then 26 of those would have to, basically majority of the states have to vote for the provision, right, whether it's objection or not. And then from the Senate, you have to have 67, 2/3, 67 of the 100 senators. Well, guess what? Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence said only 11 members of the House Republicans, Democrats, and 11 members of the Republican Democrat senators can be on the House floor, which is only, 22 from each side, doesn't hit the quorum threshold. So I argue on January 20th, at the midpoint of this Chinese ambassador's term, that's when the House needs to go ahead and do a redo of the joint session with a quorum, with enough people participating to then actually do a legitimate objection period, presenting all the evidence, 2 hours per, and then we'll see what plays out. Mind you, 28 of the states are Republican, 22 Democrat under this framework. 12th Amendment contingent election framework.
And can you see this definitely happen? Maybe not on January 20th exactly, but is this something that you're definitely pushing with your connections, in the House and Congress and stuff like that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, are you seeing for us patriots? First of all,
I was in 25 offices yesterday.
Yes, you were telling me about that.
Now, that was not a topic because we have to do a body check on the executive branch of all the lawlessness, particularly FBI. I'm glad that Jim Jordan and they created the I call it the deep state body check committee, and they're going to have to run like cockroaches because we're coming after them. Dan Bishop yesterday on the House floor, I was in his office, talked to some folks. He's going to be on a consequential committee, let's just say, and he said on the House floor, deep state, we're coming after you.
Wow, that's deep.
By name, date, time, location, transgression.
This is awesome stuff, man.
Body check if you're a hockey player.
So obviously you've already gotten into it, but let's now fold into the next part. What needs to happen? We have talked about, and I know you have so much other things we could talk about, that, but now let's transition into what needs to happen other than what you're talking about right there. What do you know needs to happen in America, in our government, with the people, with the patriots, for us to really turn this thing around?
We got to ratchet things up, all right? If you think and you felt the pressure of what they did to us over the last 2 years, you need to start having the mindset, we need to do that times 11 within this framework, though, so that we have the moral, ethical, and legal high ground when we start pushing back, okay? So give me some examples of what you felt before I give you like what we should be doing.
I had health officials in government telling me I couldn't have my place of business open that I owned. I
want a list of every single person that participated in that, not just for you, everybody listening. Because we need to create lists of people that violated the Constitution. And guess what's going to happen to every single one of those? I'm focused on at the top. But we also need to go down through the state health officials all the way down to the county school boards. And then guess what? We create consequences for that behavior so that this never happens again. What do they do to some folks? What about the J6 defendants? You think that's horrible what happened to them? Guess what? That's nothing compared to what we're going to do to them. Nothing. Wow. We're going to 100 exit. So guess what? School board member, we're going to seize all your assets in escrow. Every pharmacy that was forcing these things on people that participated in it, guess what? We're going to seize all your assets. There's going to be a collective fund that's going to be used to go ahead and pay for all of the emergency use authorized product adverse events of individuals, and then wrongful death for those family members where they had a family member die. We're going to ratchet. So not only are you going to be detained, we're going to put you in solitary confinement. This is the high-end goal that we must achieve. Otherwise, it's going to happen again. We're going to detain you while you're awaiting your trial for all these people. And there's going to be different charges. Detain, solitary confinement, seize all of your assets, and then basically, we're going to prosecute you. For the school board, we talked about child asphyxiation. I'm sure there's at least one person in your school board with a child had adverse effects from the face toilet, from the PCR test,
not at least
to
one,
the clot
I'm very involved in my
shots.
community, and it's hundreds.
So multiply that by 100. In Virginia, I'll use that as an example. Some of those felonies are it's 1 year in prison, $10,000. I think it's $1,000 per transgression on some of those instances. Well, multiply that. Imagine you're a school board member and you have 100,000 students like Fairfax County. Well, that's 1 times 100,000 students, and that's going to be your consequence. We're using the Constitution. We're using the law. But we need people in office that have the courage to basically do that. And if they don't, you and I are going to guarantee that they do. And everybody listening.
Absolutely.
We have to essentially say, you know what? No more nice guy. There's now action, reaction, so that it never happens again. I don't care what you call me. I don't care how many people you're going to deploy to investigate me, because you just did. And you talked about, I've been investigated. Let's go down the list of who I've been investigated by, so that I got some street cred.
Oh, yeah. Heck yeah.
FBI, Joint Terrorism Task Force in Virginia. What did they find? Nothing. Obviously, that's part of DOJ. Every time I fly, I'm on the secondary screening list at TSA. I have video evidence. So I've had clear and TSA pre-checked since it started. You know, clear where you submit for a background check and you just roll through. What happens? I buy a ticket, can't check in remotely, have to do it at the gate. At the gate, the guy's confused and scared. They're like, oh, I have to contact someone. I'm like, hey, relax. I know the deal by now. You contact TSA, tell them that I'm in the airport. You get my ID and this and that. And oh, by the way, my military ID doesn't work because I'm on the political hit list, and they're trying to either find something on me that they could use against me or entrap me into something. Because guess what? I'm not checking in any luggage because I don't want you to place something in my luggage.
Wow.
Because they're willing to do that.
Yeah, they will.
Right? So they're willing to do assault, battery, robbery, burglary. And I'll give you some examples. Remember Peter Navarro? Remember John Eastman? Remember Mike Lindell? What have they done to them? Armed robbery. They take and seize their phone. Under what predicate? Zero predicate. Okay? Scott Perry, congressman from Pennsylvania, just down the up the road. This is what the FBI and the federal government's doing. So anyway, TSA is essentially in constant investigation mode of me, trying to find something. Guess what I do in response? I drive everywhere. So, there's always a way to push back and win this fight. DOD, Department of Defense, Office of Secretary of Defense. I'm not allowed to go on any military installation.
Wow.
Because why? What we just talked about. I'm exposing them.
Wow.
So if you're them, it's a threat, right? I'm literally exercising my First Amendment, not affiliated in any way in my personal capacity, but yet because I'm having such an impact and reach, it's totally discrediting them because the truth is spreading like wildfire. So officers, I think there's 10. Office of Secretary of Defense, let's see, DHS, we talked about TSA, DOJ through the FBI, and then we go into the Army Criminal Investigation Division, Army Reserves, Big Army, the J6 Cover-Up Committee. I call it the Mike Pence J6 Cover-Up Committee.
Sounds right.
Headed up by his running mate, Liz Cheney.
Of course.
And so all of them have looked into me. Now, I'm sure this guy, this fraudulent, what's his name, Jack Smith, is probably looking into me as well. And they're looking at my tweets that were retweeted by a 45th president.
Wow.
So when that happens, because I've been an insider, I kind of know where to call and check and be like, hey, who is the individual that is investigating me? Oh, okay, cool. Thanks. Click. Oh, interesting. Biden donor. Oh, and then you start looking that person up, like at the Defense Intelligence Agency, and I investigate them. And then when the time comes, i.e. January 3rd, when we took over the House and the Judiciary Committee comes knocking on your door to testify, so-and-so at name every single organization I mentioned, when the House Armed Services Committee calls you in, the person, if you're listening and watching this, I'm coming after you. If you're at the Department of Defense, if you're at the Department of Justice, if you're at the Department of Homeland Security, you better lawyer up.
Man.
You better lawyer up because I'm going to have such a great time. I'm here to ruin not only your livelihood, probably I'm going to be in the we're going to be making sure that we're going to be ruining families. And it's not just because of vindictiveness. This is consequences for bad behavior so it doesn't happen again. So DOJ, DHS, DOD, and guess what? And above that, Mikey Pence, going to continue to expose you. Guess who brought in Chris Wray at FBI?
Who?
Mikey Pence and Chris Christie. They were the ones that put him there. Remember, he's a Republican.
Yeah.
But what does Faux News say about him? Oh, nothing to see here, because Paul Ryan over at Faux News is the one providing top cover for Mike Pence to facilitate his entry into the presidency in 2024. You see how corrupt this is? So that's why I've only provided support to those, what I called last week, when we saw what was going on C-SPAN.
Yep.
I call them Real Team 6 or the Patriot Posse, because they, at great political peril, they withstood the entire uniparty that was backing Kevin McCarthy. And they took away so much of his power, because they had the little power that they had individually, collectively. The Freedom Caucus is about 40 people. But then you had the terrific 20 that pushed back, and then you still had 6 withstanding to basically say, hey, Kevin, the only way you're going to be the Speaker of the House is if you meet the following demands. You're going to have a straitjacket, and you're going to wear duct tape for 2 years on your face. Meanwhile, we're going to operate. And I'm going to be up on the Hill as much as I need to be.
No, man.
Now that it's open to crush the commies.
It feels good, man, to always have conversations with people like yourself, man, because it's like a lot of us, in our audience and myself, who have truly been like fighting for truth and sticking up for what's right. And when no one else was out there, we were out there protesting and not doing what the government was telling, because we knew it was wrong and against our constitutional rights, but most importantly against our God-given rights.
Right. Everybody felt it, but everybody was too weak to push back.
Agreed, man.
And then leaders like you are like, no, not on my watch.
God.
That's why I love you, brother.
Thank you, brother.
I love you.
So I'd like you to, we're going to wrap up, but I'd like you to kind of like, tell our audience or anybody listening today kind of like what is coming. Where is your next? I know you spoke about it, but kind of give us a general 2 to 3 minute ending here of what is coming. Where are we at now? Like this is what we are coming with us Patriots. This is what we're coming for, who we're coming for, and we're going to make this right, and we're going to get rid of it. What's triggering right now when I say, hey, end this with 2 to 3 minutes of a summary of what our audience can know what's to come.
Gotcha. So I'm a positive guy. We just went through 2 years of a trifecta of complete lawlessness, adhering to Chinese Communist Party rule. We just incrementally moved into a pink trickle, because Kevin McCarthy, the leaders of the Republican Party, just as they are in the Democrat Party, are essentially managing their power. But incrementally, at the county level in Miami, did you see what happened with the school board? First time in decades that Patriots came in and are now, they lifted all the BS mandates. So right now, we're in the process of regaining territory, because we lost a lot, right? A lot of ground because of people were complicit or just hesitant, reticent. Well, now it's time to push back. Yes, massive in cadence and unison. They bought time with all the censoring, but we got your show. We got a lot of different freedom and truth platforms out there. So I ask that everybody start creating content within this vein. Everybody. I don't care if you have 2 people watching it. You just influence 2 people for the time period that you created that piece of content.
To know the truth.
And so, like, if there's 10,000 of us, we're going to be able to easily regain ground. In the house, I'm going to be up there. Anybody who wants to join me, let's roll. Because think about it. If 500 people walk into the Capitol and legally, peacefully, patriotically just hit and inundate every single staffer on the Hill, 500 people ain't that much. Even if it's 10 people. I went to 25 offices yesterday, and I'm hitting chiefs of staff, the comms directors, this and that. I'm like, hey, this is the priority. And guess what? I am going to volunteer my time to tell you what to do. And by the way, it's not like that I'm directing you what to do. This is like the ideal plan for those that are bound by the Bible and the Constitution. So I'm going to do the work for you. All you got to do is do it. We have the people in place right now to do it, to weaken the lawlessness in the executive branch with the House, and then we regain and retake ground by increasing those numbers in the House. I'm not talking about, I could care less if you have an R by your name. I want you to have a spine to push back against lawlessness. And right now, there's only a core group of people that's doing it. And guess what? They just, like, less than 10% just absolutely are owning the House right now.
Wow.
That's all we need in the Senate. Like, think about it. If you had 2-3 fighters in the U.S. Senate and you're putting them up against, like, just total weaklings. I mean, imagine if you go into a room of lemmings, you're going to basically psychologically tell them what needs to be done.
Right.
Now, I don't mean that in a negative way. It's, hey, this is what needs to happen because it meets legal, ethical, and moral norms. And these other people that are out there that are promulgating it, they don't have our interests in mind.
They don't.
And so when we push that in person, digitally, we're going to win. Easy.
Guys, once again, Ivan Raiklin, thank you for, I know you've been so busy. I mean, you were on, Tucker Carlson the other day. Where are you at on Tuesday? You're with, who you with today?
Alex Jones, I think, in Austin.
Obviously.
I'm doing One America later today.
Yeah, now that the house is there, like people, it's opening up, and it feels good to see after all these years of fighting, it's finally, the truth is exploding.
Oh, yeah.
And you're one of those people on the forefronts that's truly leading this, man, and we're going to be behind you. So you're going to keep
couldn't do it without this phenomenal studio,
man. Thank you, man. Make me blush. But we're gonna, our audience, we're gonna keep people, up to date on what's going on with you, where we can help you out at, because we have to be together on this. And we're gonna put.
We're learning. It's constant learning. So I keep my chat open on Telegram because I'm learning from the engagement and interaction. Because some people present something, it's like we gotta lift ourselves up so that we are critical thinkers. You got to establish leaders, right? Once you establish leaders, then you can have followers, right?
Guys, in a world full of right and left, it's not about that. That's what we're talking about. It's not about right-wing news, left-wing news, RD. We truly are coming together now to make the difference. In 2023, you're going to see an awakening like no other. You're going to see the truth exposed like no other. So I'd like once more to thank Ivan Raiklin for being here today.
We're going to raise the bar.
We're going to tag all his stuff. And for him to make the time, like I said, he travels everywhere. He doesn't fly, but he's driving all over the place to make sure that we hear the truth from somebody with experience and real credibility. Stop listening to the fake crap. Keep tuning in with the people you know are telling the truth from experience and credibility. So, Ivan, what we're going to do is we're going to pray out. Episode 13 was amazing. We thank you, man, and we're gonna stay together, all right? Lord God, just thank you for just another amazing episode. We just ask prayers over Ivan and the future of what he's doing for us and our country and honestly overall in the world, and we're going to be supporting him in his journey and having his back on that, Lord God. And we just pray over our audience here today that are listening in, no matter what struggles they're having with their lives right now. We just ask that we pray over them and their families, and you give them good health and stability and courage during these times right now, Lord God. And we just thank you for starting 2023 off with a bang and being here with the Sefcik Show as we continue to push truth and just be with us in all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen. Ivan, thanks a lot, man. You're the man. We're going to be tagging all of his stuff, and stay tuned. That's the end of episode 13. Thank you to Doug, producer back behind the cameras of Lever Dreams.
Obrigado.
And we will see you at the next episode. God bless.